Good evening, everyone. It's Tom Sidney Rushdell, aka Numbers, here from Psych.Club and also from my second channel, the Tom Numbers Show. And I have the magnificent Mr. Gene DECODE. Gene, how are you, sir?
Oh, Tom, thank you so much. Doing good, but like a little harried with the amount of busyness, getting a website up really soon and then doing decodes to put on the website so that when people go there, they can have actually, well, not just go, oh, that's a beautiful website. What are you going to put here? So getting some stuff done, and then the myself, and then also the Blessed for Service team that helps me all over the world are also doing a lot of really good decodes. And then I did a envisioning to help change the world on Ukraine with Julie Braun on her visioning with Julie B on Saturday. Okay. And part of the decode that the Hungary-Austria coordinator put together, a really excellent one that we'll be doing the complete part of that on the website when it's up. It'll probably be a multi-part, so it'll probably go for a few months, just like some of the stuff I'm going to be doing on expanding in Hollow Earth. The Hollow Earth part is so massive, it's going to probably take me, I'm going to do 1 hour to hour and a half presentation a month for probably take me half a year or more to get it all done once every month for 6 months, because, you know, there's Operation High Jump, and then there's the British that was in Nexus Magazine, Invasion of Base 201 or New Schwaberland. And then there's all of the information, and I got maps. James Rinkmeet sent me some stuff and all the stuff on the Hanabus and maps of the inner Earth. And I've got lists of the entrances and the different countries and continents and capitals and peoples, and I mean it's on and on and on. Just like as I kept going, it's the rabbit hole gets bigger and bigger. Literally, it's like going down into the center of the Earth, and it explodes outward, and you're like, wow, this is immense down here. So it's like a lot of the decodes I've done, but I realize now it's going to probably take 6 months or so to get it all presented. And I've got documentation and studies and videos and pictures, and that's going to be really a lot of fun for people to learn. It's something really enjoyable. And then also to know that now, for the first time, as far as I know in history, that the inner Earth groups are actually helping the surface, other than coming after a disaster like the flood and kickstarting civilization again after everybody's wiped out. Now they're actually being proactive instead of reactive, and helping with the tunnels and the dams and all of that, because they've realized that we're in the same planet. They're in it, we're on it. And that what the cabal is now, you know, what they were getting ready to do and what they're in the process of doing, and due to their own stupidity in a lot of cases, they were getting ready to create some major catastrophes that would have not only wiped the planet out, it had the potential for doing that. They've actually done it on parallel timelines, and they were doing incursions. That's why Doctor Strange, the new movie, came out with incursions and showing what an incursion for cross timelines. And they were doing incursions literally across timelines in the thousands. And so they were literally getting ready to be an incursion on the level, not like what you saw in Doctor Strange, the new movie, where a couple timelines collapsed on each other, but where thousands would collapse on each other. They've already done maneuvers with the negative groups like the Draco and stuff, where they truncated a timeline and tucked it into ours, like Tataria and that stuff. So there's a lot of buildings and a few people that came from a different Earth, from a different timeline. And so they've been doing this and using technology from the Philadelphia experiment. After that, they created the Montauk Project, and they were going back and changing our past. And that creates new timelines. You can't actually get rid of somebody. So they would get rid of somebody on an entire manifold, and that would create a new manifold. And it doesn't get rid of the old one, because it's just wings off a new series of events. You can't actually get rid of something that once it's there. And so, other than an incursion. And so, because of the likelihood of a massive incursion, like if you watch that movie with Doctor Strange, that new one I was mentioning, they show a crossroads area, and they say it's a crossroads area. Actually, what you're looking at, I'm actually aware of that location of that place where they're showing you in the movie. That's an incursion of 10 lines or 10 parallel universes that imploded. That's why you see different parts of different realities that are floating around. 10 lines collapsed on each other. That's a 10-line incursion. If you're talking thousands, the amount of devastation across the multiverse would ripple out, and it could really compromise a major segment of the multiverse. So because of that, the Council of Seven has been addressing that and going to the galactic groups such as the Guardian Alliance and the IAFW, the Infinite Alliance of Free Worlds, and other federational systems that were petitioning for them to go and make exception to the non-interference that they do, because the negatives have been doing such interference here for so long. And so what they have agreed to do is where non-terrestrial groups, negative ones, were involved, they would then come in and help us. So that means all out in space, because a big reason that the NAZIs were able to get in space and get on the moon and get on Mars was because of the Draco and the Zeta Reticuli, the short, small gray guys. And so they actually had a swastika-shaped base that now is, once the lease ran out, because the moon's pretty much spoken for, all the territory on the moon has something by some group, some from somewhere, especially the backside, is completely inhabited. So they had to get a lease on land, and then the lease expired, and the Corporation of the United States took that over, and they built it out into Lunar Operations Center, A, B, or depending on how you want to use A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And so, because of all of the taking of people off world and human, removing humans and removing gold, and now I find out removing water, significant amounts from the earth, and then all of this technology that they were giving to the negative, to the deep state, various factions of the deep state, such as the NAZIs, the triads, the many different families and different, agreement structures they have, various other forces that are on the side of free choice agreed to help the human race and other other terrestrials and non-terrestrials here to help us out. And so now it's actually starting to turn the tide. They've cleaned the universe, the solar system, and locked it down. Most people have heard of Radiant Glory and Radiant Guardian. Radiant Guardian and Radiant Glory are part of Solar Warden, which started in a little bit after World War II in the 50s. They started learning how to use that technology that they found when they got into mainland Germany. That World War II ended, and the Allies got into mainland Germany and found these big, huge underground facilities with some of the few craft they left. They had taken most of the stuff, and then a whole fleet of submarines, 390 they found, of these giant whole class of submarine they hadn't seen, that was so massive you could drive a semi-truck. And they were taking that, they found, down to Antarctica, and they had created a base there, which is, they call Base 211 or New Schwaberland. And so first the British tried to invade that, then of course Operation High Jump with Admiral Byrd, and that was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. And because by that time they actually could use the Hanabus and the other craft they had. Prior to that, they couldn't use them in World War II, because if you have an anti-gravitic vessel and you fire a cannon on it or something, it causes a repulsive force. So you need particle weapons that don't create a repulsive force. Well, they had those by that time. So when Byrd with that fleet went down there, they wiped out the carrier, damaged a lot of the support ships, wiped out all of the aircraft. So he was set with his tail between his legs back to DC to tell DC to surrender to the NAZIs there. And they, of course, like I said, had already gotten bases on the moon and Mars as well. And we're already developing that way a fourth and fifth Reich. And so that then became the Dark Fleet that expanded out. So during World War II, the secret groups, William Tompkins, if you've seen those interviews, goes into that with Kerry Cassidy, who was developing a whole set of fleets for the U.S. Navy, and also turned the Air Force started getting a little bit in on it too. And that became the beginning of what is now known as Solar Warden, where they sealed up the ballast tanks on the bottom and then pressurized it with noble gases and extremely high energy so that it actually becomes, in that case, and you cause it to circulate in a toroid, or what's called a U4 toroid or Mercabic field, so that it creates an anti-gravitic lift. And they were lifting submarines into space. And that became the beginning of Solar Warden. And in 1987, an agent of the Dark Fleet that was infiltrated actually got the mind wipe device that the deep state was using on all of the scientists working with them, so that when they would go to the moon or Mars or Dulce or whatever, and a lot of people going to Dulce were actually going off world when they think they were going to Dulce, because they have shuttles in Dulce that would go through a portal. They wouldn't even know it. And you'd look out a window, you're thinking you're looking out at somewhere in New Mexico or something. You're actually on Mars. It's a hologram. So they found this all out when they got the mind wiper and found a way to get the memories back for the scientists. And they go, wow. So that then allowed for Solar Warden to be taken into the hands of the White Hats and through what was called the Plan, which it started as a small binder about 3 inches thick that was starting about 1903 as Howard Hughes, one of the first big, huge billionaires from the oil industry, but other than the deep state types like Carnegie and Rockefeller and those types, and was doing defense contracting. And he would never get the bid. He'd undercut everybody else, and he had a superior product, but he would never get the contracts. And so he was like, I don't understand. I'm providing a better product at a lower cost with all the blueprints, everything, developing working models in a lot of cases, and I don't get it. Well, he's single, good-looking guy. Of course, he, very wealthy, one of the early billionaires. So he had a lot of really gorgeous Hollywood girlfriends. And so he trained a bunch of them in how to be honeypots, and had them get with CEOs of these other companies that were getting the contracts. And finally, one of the gals came back to him with a video, a small spy camera that she taped a satanic ritual child sacrifice for a bunch of these CEOs were there. And she showed, and a bunch of high-end corporate types, and politicians and really high level people in the world. And it said, this is why there's an organization and you're not part of it, and it's worldwide, and it's satanic, and it's deep, and it's dark, and it's really evil, and if you're not in the club, you're not going to get in the door. So he realized that, that's when he became a recluse, and people thought he'd become agoraphobic, and he actually retreated to develop the plan. And he contacted Nikola Tesla and Van de Graaff and Trump's uncle and grandfather, and they started the plan. And that was how to throw down the deep state and the cabal on all, the world, and out in Moon and Mars and all that later. And so as of course that developed in World War II and World War I, World War II, the stuff on the Moon and Mars, they had to keep altering the plan to where it got to be a massive integrated thing. And then when they, planned, and then they had big setbacks like Kennedy and Reagan, and as well as once there was an entire plane of their generals that was taken down. And everybody was, of course, killed, and they've crashed planes and stuff many a time. And, what they're trying to do, of course, is to get absolute control. And what Hitler's second book after Mein Kampf was the New World Order, to create that, like George Bush said, from 1,000 points of light, if you translate that into German, it's literally Hitler's invasion speech, essentially, right before he invaded Poland, of the unification of Germany, just take 1,000 points of light and turn it into a 1,000-year Reich and a few other changes. And so the plan developed out. And then when they took over Solar Warden in 1987, then they created 2 fleets. They separated it out. So you have Radiant Guardian, which operates from the asteroid field, which is the remnants of the planet Tiamat, with one small planetoid in it called Ceres that has bases on it too. If you look at Dauntless Dialogue, he interviews a man that had been on that for quite a few years. He had been forced by one of the deep state. He'd insulted the child of a deep state person, and they had kidnapped him and enslaved him, and then he worked his way up and got monies and spent quite a few years out there in those areas. And so, as William Tompkins said, showed how they developed those fleets. So then Radiant Guardian and Radiant Glory, and then Radiant Glory takes from the asteroid belt out to the Oort cloud, and so they protect our solar system. So they started infiltrating the Dark Fleet, which is, of course, the NACIs, and a lot of the commanders of the ships were starting to of the NACI upper elite, the Aryan elite, were getting rather disenfranchised with the Draco, because they had to have a Draco on every presence that pretty much told them what to do on every ship. And then they were really forcing the integration of the stuff that we see getting put in people's arms, the graphenes and those AI kind of mixing in with who we are. And they didn't like that. So there was a captain that rose to the rank of admiral, and he had put his people that he trusted as captains, and many, it turned out to be at first about 10%. So he was able to defect 10% of the Dark Fleet into the Solar Warden. And so they got all of the information on all of the different ships and locations and worlds that they had gone throughout in the Milky Way, where they would go to a planet and tell them they're going to be invaded and we'll protect you. And then they bombard it with meteors and said, that's your enemy coming in. Well, it's actually them, problem, action, solution on a world scale, where they would take a world by doing that. And then they come in and get them ready for the invasion. And they would say, okay, we'll give you the technologies, but you got to create essentially they create a Babylonian money system for them, like our Federal Reserve and world banking system. They would tear apart their spirituality and their sacred books like they did here with the original 777 books of the Bible, and bring it down and tear it apart and divide it up into different groups. Like here we have the original Abrahamic religions of the Muslim faith, with the original Quran written by Ishmael being completely rewritten by Muhammad. And you've got the Jewish faith, which is actually Hebrew, being called the Jewish faith, which is actually the Khazarian or the Zionists that came from another system to here to rule this planet. And so all of that's being integrated, and now the plan has gotten so sophisticated. You had a lot of super soldiers and special forces that realized what they were involved in and joined this plan. And so now finally we're actually starting to get traction, and the DUMs and the tunnels that are all over the world that are incredibly massive. When I first talked about that 3 years ago, several people said, I'm totally insane and I'm living delusional. I'm absolutely lying. And now it's pretty much known to the world. You can literally, with what the plan is progressing and the alliance is doing underground, you can actually map it now, because they're doing small tactical nukes and all kinds of stuff taking out these facilities. You just plot the earthquakes at the depths of 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and 10 kilometers, which is where most of the facilities are located at those depths. And you line them up over time, and you can literally use a mapping function to map out where the stuff is now. And so, a lot of people now have heard, for example, under the Vatican, there's a massive dome with a tunnel system that went all the way to Jerusalem. They map it straight. It actually goes to Albania first, and then it goes down to Jerusalem. And then when they got to Albania, as they got into that dome, and they cleared out the 35 C5 galaxies of the gold, which was, an amount of gold you can't even comprehend. It revealed another tunnel system that went all the way to Switzerland, and up it found that the majority of the Alps are hollowed out and full of gold and missing artifacts and artwork and all kinds of things. And so that's now being found out. And now they've actually started to find below that a level of catacombs of just like in under Paris, where there's just bones and in the millions of people's worth of bones. And it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And then they're finding now with technology they have that can penetrate down into the earth and look that there's actually another huge dome down there. And they found movement and other things, and some very adept remote viewers that can remote view at the soul level actually saw that there's still Alpha Draco Prime down there. It was believed they had, either surrendered or left from a portal they opened over Antarctica. But now it turns out, because in the Draco Society, the men don't really make the decisions or do that. They may fight the battles like Shaka Zulu and did and all that. But the people really running Shaka Zulu was his mom and his sister. It's a matriarchal society. Even more so with the Draco. The men actually pretty much have no impetus to be thinking for themselves. They're just kind of warriors in battle and mates. And it's actually kind of not a good thing when a Draco Prime female wants you to be her mate, because it's much like a praying mantis kind of situation. When you're done, that's the last thing you do. You're the meal after you have the mate ritual done. And so they've now found that underneath that tunnel system they had, there's another labyrinths of tunnels that are like the catacombs in Paris, of millions of people that they've been taking over generations and consuming. And so there's all these bones. So they're clearing out the bones now and, cleaning the area out. And they found more tunnels that are going into a massive underground dome, and that saw that there is actually a Draco Prime, the whites, and a queen, and it becomes obvious now because you have to have a queen in charge, because the males aren't capable of that level of thought and action. So they thought she had left, and that would have, why they seem disorganized now. But she actually has stayed, and she's moving from that area. And it's become obvious to me why, back in the boards, 16+1 was saying, save Israel. We save Israel for last. Yeah, because that's the nest. That's the nest for Earth of these Draco. That's where they've tunneled it's like a termite mound under there. I was looking at that, remote viewing that and seeing it. It's just like a termite mound. It just goes and goes and goes. So what the inner Earth people and the different groups of the Alliance now are doing is Hoover Dam, for example, the mainstream is saying that there was a generator that blew. Actually, no, that's special forces going in, and now you can see it's drained below the 1,000 feet level. It's lower than it's been unless you go back to 1937. It's below the 1,000-foot levels, and important because now you can't run the hydroelectric systems and the generators at all. And they're draining and draining and draining it. And they're draining it not just through the gates, but into the earth to clean out the mess. And so it becomes obvious that water has been going from many of the dams, like Three Gorges, and they're draining them down into the mess down there to wash it out into the center of the earth. When it's done, they'll bring it back up again. The Garthans have that technology. And it's also obvious to me, because I've been looking and kind of thinking about this for a while, that not only have the non-terrestrial negative groups been removing humans from Earth and gold, because of documents you look from the Committee of 300 and stuff like Dr. Coleman had and things, showing bank accounts in the Switzerland and things with the amount of gold in the tens of thousands of tons, and then accounts where there's 4% interest rate or something, and the amount of value is now, I have to do it in powers of 10 because I don't know how to name it. when you get high, it's, million, billion, trillion, you get up, that's no million, dodecil, but at the point where you have 114 zeros behind a number, like the number 8, 114 zeros, I'm like, okay, 8 times 10 to the 114th power. Well, if I do the math, if you round up and say there's 8 billion people on Earth, that's easy. 8 into H1 and subtract the power from the billions, 10 to the 9th, I believe. So if I say 10 to the 9th from 10 to the 114th, 9 from 114, or 10 to the, if I'm doing my math right, 10 to the 95th power. Every person on Earth has 10 to the 95th power in dollars, backed by gold. That's an amount of gold you can't, you could spend $1 million a minute all your life. You wouldn't even come close to touching the prime, let alone any interest. That's why we used to live. People don't remember because they've been soul trapping and wiping our memories and bringing us back again and again and go into the tunnel and see the light and go into that. And that's actually just the grid, be doing this decode also in deep dives. That's just the grid work to keep you ensnared here in this trap that they feed off of your energy. And that's why they do all the terror porn, fear porn all the time. They feed off that illusion. They feed physically off us. They feed off the gold. They turn it into monatomic gold. And that's a lot of the basis of their psychic abilities. And then they're taking the water off for, cold energy, what they call cold fusion, low energy nuclear reactions, and many other things as well. You look at the Solomon Sea, that actually used to go all the way up to Mount Shasta. And there were surf shops. You can see back in the 50s, 50s cars, pictures, and look at Solomon Sea, just do any searching. You can see pictures of 50s cars on the shore of the sea by a surf shop near Barstow, for example. It's like, and now you find in the sands up there, even up in Barstow, Missouri riverboats buried in the sand. So, where's all the water been going? Well, a lot of they've been stealing it, and now we're having to drain it, clean the mess of the termite mounds they've created all under, going all the way. And, thank God the Garthans have finally saw the writing on the wall, as well as the non-terrestrial groups helping us. And then, of course, the cabal never honors a treaty, so they did an invasion into the 10 kingdoms, and then that broke a treaty that's been for tens of thousands of years. So those are helping too. And that's 10 parallel universes. If you know the 10 kingdoms, you can watch the movie on it. That's actually all true too. Most of what you see coming out of Hollywood is what is Tavistock Institute calls long-range preconditioning. So that if information gets out first, you have plausible deniability. That's just a movie. The second thing it is to precondition people so they don't freak out when you just go ahead and tell them, like they are now doing a lot of things. They're just telling, we're doing this, and we're going to create New World Order, and we're going to do this, and we're doing that. So that's kind of just a basic update for you, Tom. And then, the Ukraine is actually a massive thing. What's under there is mind-boggling. I think it could be the largest pyramid on Earth, complete intact, like the pyramids of Giza used to be, with a lime, polished stone on the side that was gorgeous. One was black, one was white. I don't know what the color of the third one was, and then they had the gold capstone. So this one actually still has the gold capstone, all the sighting, and from what I'm being told, the gold capstone is a type of gold that is so incredibly rare that most people have never even heard of it, which is a green gold. So it creates an energy. All of that's tied together into a system that would destroy the matrix of the soul trap. It's like when I was young and I'd go camping up high in 13,000 feet and stuff with my father, and I'd look up in the sky and I'd go, how come there's grid lines in the sky? Dad goes, I don't see anything. And I've always seen that. And a few people, if you're reasonably awake or you're born as a indigo child like myself, then you're able to see those things. And so now, that would tear that down, plus the Great Awakening and the getting close to the photon belt, what they call the Masonic ring, is actually now allowing people to get to a level that when they die, they punch through it and they're creating holes and faster than they can repair that soul trap. And so all of that combined together, it's now we're starting to see a good light at the end of the real tunnel of light, which is the end of the cabal and the fall of that. With Ukraine, as Klaus Schwab said, will be the end of the New World Order. Really obvious, Russia's on a gold standard and their economy is exploding. They can't even figure out where to spend all the money. It's like we used to be before we got on a fake money fiat system. And so once those two huge lines of highly built and fortifications are gone, they'll sweep across that. And all of those buried technologies with cold, low energy nuclear refining areas for thorium, the pyramids, the bases where they were doing back engineering as well as non-terrestrial bases. A lot of that's in Crimea. There's a massive amount of stuff that'll get technology out, as well as revealing the 35 facilities of upgrading weapons of war that get jabbed or carried to people we've all known they've been doing, like Bill Gates is talking about. She said that, if you didn't pay attention to the first one, you certainly will to the second. As Fake said, will be one during Mr. T's term. And of course there was. And so if they're saying there's going to be one, that's exactly what they were going to do. So, thank God that Putin went in. Unfortunate what the deep state is their reply is to kill all of have family in Ukraine, of the Ukrainian people, have a loss of a male member, a male person, a father or brother or something like that, so that they'll hate Russia. And to have so much infrastructure damage that it'll break the back of the economy of Russia. That's not going to happen. Their economy screaming, number one. Number two, once a country is stabilized and that's all taken care of, you have to rebuild it. What does that mean? Lots of jobs, lots of materials needed, lots of training, lots of schooling. The Ukraine will come back. It has amazing black soil. It's an amazing growth area for growth of all kinds of different crops. And so, when the truth comes out, because they're finding mass graves there, he didn't create a conflict. He interceded in one that's been going for decades. And we'll be doing that on Deep Dives too. The Hungary, Austria coordinator put together a DECODE. As I mentioned, that I did part of on GB's envisioning on Saturday, envisioning all of this come to a quick end so that people can be sent to the meat grinder by the Zelensky regime, because that's their goal. And they're obviously now throwing him under the bus, because they're saying that his military actually using people as human shields, when they were saying, no, he wasn't before. And one of the high level of the deep state is saying, well, we think Russia may try to assassinate you. Yeah, when the deep state tells you that, that means they're going to try to assassinate you. So that's why Zelensky, I don't think it's the deep state bidding, that he went to Xi and, he's trying to go to Xi and say, help me, please. Because he sees the writing on the wall. Help me, please, they're going to kill me. So it's fascinating, everything going on and all of the stuff. It's hard to keep up with. There's a lot going on. So thank you for letting me ramble, Tom.
Oh, you're welcome, Gene. It's good to... there's so many points you hit upon. What do you... I might ask this a little bit later, but I wanted to talk about some of the films. What do you see in terms of... I know timelines can, as you've eloquently put right at the beginning, can get mashed around because there's so many timelines going on and being collapsed, etc. But what do you see for this summer period? Okay, I'll come out with it. So I'm a big fan of the Terminator movies, and in my understanding, I believe there's a lot of Q material in those films. I see other things as well in them, but I see kind of a dark and a light in those films. And there's a big thing about Judgment Day coming up, and Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister that stepped down here in the UK, quoted Terminator 2. He said, "Hasta la vista, baby. He said that in his very final words as PM, the last PM questions. And President Trump has also been pointing things out in regards to Back to the Future. So he did an interview with a lady from OAN, the network, and I've been piecing together that Trump is in the Back to the Future movies heavily, and but it turns out, you probably know this already, but I didn't know this. So the lady said they've been interviewed in Bedminster in New Jersey, and the numbers on Bedminster, New Jersey, so Bedminster comes to 109 in simple gematria. 109 equals the word 17, and then New Jersey comes to 124, which comes to gigawatts. But if you add them together, it comes to 233, which comes to follow the white rabbit from the Matrix. It comes to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. It comes to 10 days, the 10 days of darkness. It comes to gold-backed digital currency. So that caught my attention. But she said, a lot of people won't know this, but we're here in Bedminster. And this used to be the home of John DeLorean, who was the guy that the DeLorean car in the time machine car in Back to the Future. And President Trump said, yes, a long time ago, yes. And then he said about the Copperswaite family as well. And he pointed that out. I looked them up, and they were actually, I think they're in 1917. 1917 is obviously when JFK was born. President Trump was doing comms on that at the beginning of 2020 when the world changed, and he kept referring to the Spanish flu as the flu of 1917, which was deliberate, miscommunication on his part, but giving a con because it was supposed to be 1918, the Spanish flu, but 1917. And also in Back to the Future 2, when old Biff gives young Biff the almanac, the sports almanac, they're listening to, I think it's an American football game, and the final score, the team is losing, but then they finally pick up the victory right on the death's doors of the game, and it finishes 1917. So I didn't know this, but President Trump owns Bedminster National Golf Course, Trump National Bedminster is the previous property of John DeLorean, who was the owner of the DeLorean cars of Back to the Future. So I've been looking at that and thinking, I think they're trying to tell us a few things. And going back to Terminator with Boris Johnson, August 29th is coming up soon. If you do the numbers on Monday, August 29th, it comes to 333, and there's a huge 333 building just down the road from where President Trump lives at Mar-a-Lago. And I'm just wondering, are we ramping up to something? Because there's even the it seems like a deep state thing, but it might be a white hat cover in New York. They're prepping people in case of a nuclear event. They're saying, stay indoors, or wash your hands, all that stuff in a nuclear event, and they've been putting that out in New York City apparently, because you can get the reports on YouTube, but it seemed like it was focused at New York. So I'm wondering, do you see anything with that? Is there going to be some kind of scare event? I don't think it will take place. I don't think it will physically happen, but it looks like maybe we could be heading for that. But like you said, the timelines are all over the place. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, the reason they would not actually a scare event, but have that available in case they need to get people indoors and out of the way. If the deep state tries to, run for it or get out of the domes or get out of the tunnels or whatever, and they need to do a lockdown of a certain area to keep the civilians out of the way so they don't get injured in the mop-ups you take out a anthill and, the ants will try to run out of the hill if you're flooding it, and that's like they are. So you need to have people kept safe. And so that's a way to do it. And then, of course, the 10 days of darkness and EBS and all that is another way to help try to keep people safe. So, 107 is always saying a near-death experience. Well, if you had all of that technology and all of this information and all of the stuff that's under the Vatican, and all the catacombs of bones and all of that come to the minds of the world, they would have a near-death experience. They'd be in shock it would take a year for everybody to recover. And it's a near-death experience or event, but it's not a catastrophic one. It's the end of a catastrophic one. It's the end of an old world order that was not fair, and a fair world order coming into being, in which you have a gold standard in every place. There's tons of gold for everybody, and then you can use that for his conductors and all of that, and to receive atmosphere monotomically, and you can go into silver and platinum based with real backing on real currencies that are literally made out of that of gold, if you'd like. Everybody keeps talking about digital currencies, and that's a road to perdition. That's a road to absolute control. Even if you were to supposedly have it gold backed, or you could go refund it for gold, all they have to do is tie it to a social credit system. And then if you have stuff in tech embedded in you, they can track you, they can monitor you, they know everything you're thinking, doing, and your social credit score and all of that, and you won't get access to it. Doesn't matter if it's backed, you won't be able to go get it because your social score doesn't rate. And so again, it's got to be tangible in your hand. And so, I see a lot of things possible by November as our midterms, and highly likely, because I don't see a point of a midterm, as Phil Gadowski is always saying. What's the point of having another election if they've got it utterly rigged? The machines are still connected to the internet. The ballot boxes can still be stuffed and all of that stuff. So what's the point? Yeah. No point unless you clean the system up. And so if they, I see that as absolutely mandatory. And I think that's what Trump is saying with all of these, symbols and linkage that you were doing. It's saying that this is coming. Like I was saying, they're getting close. The light's being visible at the end of the tunnel. I've got military things showing and getting information showing that, we're getting on top of it. There's, pockets of resistance where you see the earthquakes and that stuff, those depths I mentioned earlier. But we're actually now in the lead. And I see that coming also from the deep states. You can look at what's going on. Like they had a Holocaust meeting, where there was going to be recognition of the Holocaust, and the Bilderbergers actually took it over and had an emergency meeting. And they've always been in control of this situation on this planet for millions of years. Well, it's like I was telling Nina Rodriguez, if you've always been the best fighter in the ring and you've always taken the attack, you don't have a counterattack, you don't have defenses, you've never needed them. Now, when you get a superior fighter, or everybody in the playground's ganged up against the bullies, and the bullies are getting beaten and they don't know what to do, they get a meeting together and they're bullies. So they're going to argue about it. And it actually, at that meeting, wound up getting into fisticuffs. Klaus Schwab and they're throwing punches at each other physically. It's like a bunch of bullies are like, no, I think we don't. No, well, the heck with you, or bow, right in the schnauzer. Right? So it's, obviously that things are coming apart. And,
thank goodness.
With the earthquakes, with the flooding, with the water disappearing, with the obvious weather, where I live, I was born here, you don't see lightning with no thunder, especially you get up in the mountains where you're at 10, 12, 13,000 feet. You have thunder first. You don't see the lightning first. You hear the thunder first as the thunderheads are coming in. We had in 16 and 17, when this first started, every night it would cloud up and get these tall, not regular thunderheads. They're kind of round, disky shaped things and elongated, like cigar-like things. I go, that looks like a solar warship to me. And then you'd just see lightning from one cloud, these round, disky ones to the long cigar ones. And I go, yeah, I actually know the technology. You're talking electric cannons and, all kinds of stuff. So, and particle weapons and all kinds of things going on. And that went on. And then you saw on the cue boards where they're saying Snowflake and, Big Bird, and they're taking all of these satellites down or over. And now you see some stuff that they're trying to get out as their anthills are being flooded. And you'll see, like I have contacts in different places all over the world that email me stuff, videos of clouds like that again, and lightning with no thunder from China, from Israel, from you name it, all over the world. And so it's obvious now that the rats are trying to, or the ants, or whatever you want to call them, are fleeing the sinking ship. Their ship is literally being flooded, and they're trying to get out, but Solar Warden has the system locked down, so they can't get out. And I foresee that it's extremely likely on the timeline that I see that they're going to clean the election process worldwide so that when we vote, we get who we vote. If we vote the majority for the Trump or for whoever, that's who you get.
Yeah. What did you see in terms of, you said at the beginning with your website and talking about all the entrances to Hollow Earth all around the world? I'm wondering, do you have any here in the UK that you can talk about or share where some of these entrances are, where the kind of portals, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, entrances to the Hollow Earth are that you mentioned that is going to be available on your website? Are you able to give a little teaser on where?
Oh yeah, there's actually done decodes on the UK, on the DOMs and stuff in the UK, and I'll be doing updates on that when I get my website up. But it's really easy. It's just follow your lore. For example, you have the old Sherlock Holmes series, not old, a relatively newer one with
Cumberbatch with Strange,
yeah.
with Dr. Strange.
The guy that plays Dr. Strange, and they went up to, I think it was either Bentwaters or Dublin Downs or one of those big facilities, and he was hallucinating and all that stuff. That's a dome. Where they've been doing that kind of research, and he said, no, it's not actually that. No, it is actually that. They did show they were doing genetic engineering and that, and there was a rabbit that would glow in the dark or something, all kinds of stuff. So, and of course, we know the symbol of the white rabbit again. So they're showing you stuff, and you've got a lot of areas that have that kind of reputation, like Bentwaters, Dublin Downs, and Rothschild residences, and many of those things, and castles that are going under, as well as along the Parliament under the Tower of London, all along your Downing Street residences.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing under Downing Street is nothing but tunnels and maglev entrances and all kinds of things. Wow. And then Liverpool's the same way. Liverpool's completely full of stuff. And then a lot of Scotland and Wales also have, and Ireland have a lot of stuff. So if you just go to places, you have a history of things that are unexplained, it's just appearing out of nowhere. That's appearing out of nowhere, is appearing out from under the ground. You don't know there's an entrance there, and it's hologrammed, or because they can make holograms. That's how I first came to study it, as I was on my last tour of duty in Hawaii, and I was seeing submarines pulling in, and then SSBNs, ballistic submarines, U.S. ballistic submarines pulling in and offloading all their missiles, all of them. And I'm like, I don't understand. We're disarming. I mean, I've done tours, quite a few what we call patrols on nuclear submarines, ballistic submarines. And I'm like, I don't remember any SALT treaty or anything saying we're going to disarm everything. So one day I followed a flatbed semi off the ferry from Ford Island, where the SSBN had offloaded some nuclear ballistic missiles. And I followed the truck, the semi-truck, the flatbed, and it went into what is known as Alimano Crater, which is a small volcanic crater that has Navy military housing. And you're talking a very small crater with very sharp turning streets and housing. He's driving in. I'm like, how's he going to get that out? I mean, I've tried to back up a trailer, let alone a semi with flatbed with 2 missiles on it. It's not easy. So I drove up on the rim of the crater to watch what's going to happen. And I got out of my car. I'm just sitting down on the side of the crater rim, looking down at this semi driving in. And instead of turning into the housing as he got in, there's these old steel welded shut walls where those used to be ammo storage built into the side of the crater. And I knew there's tunnels that they would take them to the ships in Pearl Harbor during World War II. So if the Japanese came back, they'd be able to defend themselves. They had built that system. And so this semi drove straight into that wall of that crater where those steel doors are welded shut. And they didn't open. He just drove into it. When I first started going straight at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to ram that thing. And it just drove in. There was no impact, no nothing. I'm watching this thing disappear into a solid wall of rock and steel. I'm like, I'm like rubbing my eyes. I'm like, what am I hallucinating? I don't do anything. I'm completely sober. I don't do drugs. I don't understand. So I went down after it's gone after about an hour, drove my car up to that park. There's a little, parking kind of just dirt area there. I pulled my car in. I got out of my car, went up to touching it with my hand. I'm expressing, thinking my hand's going to go through the wall, right? Through the steel. Nothing happened. It's solid. It feels cold, like steel wood. So I go over to the dirt part. I'm knocking rocks down. So I go a little further down. I climb up on top, and I'm, standing above where he drove in, and I'm feeling it all around as much as I can. But I don't understand. And the crater wall is not as long. The thickness of that wall is not as long as the sunlight. He didn't turn either. I'm like, how could he drive straight and not come out the other side? Even if he could phase through it, why didn't I see him coming out? So I, literally drove my car back up on top of the rim and looked over the other side and walked down the other side, see if I see, any way he could have driven down through there. No, there's no way. So I just stood there and waited there where I could look at both sides of the rim till almost dark. And then the semi came out facing the other way, the way he drove in, straight, coming out the side of the wall again. And I'm going with the flatbed with no missiles on it. And I'm doing the mental calculation for the length of all this. I'm looking at the other side. Why am I not seeing the other end sticking out the other side? Where is it? How can it be coming out of something it's longer than it's wide? The crater rim is not as wide as the length of the semi. How's it coming out straight? I mean, it's, now I realize it can actually, like the TR3s, you look at the size of that on the outside, you go inside, it's massively bigger. They can change dimensionality. They can phase through solid rock with the technology they got from the Philadelphia experiment and advanced the Montauk projects and all of this stuff and the space programs and all of this. It's like, but then I was like, so there must be a massive dome there. So, I started researching and I would be talking to people and people would just show up. I used to do Tai Chi in Capilani Park and take classes there. And a guy showed up one time because here you're interested in XYZ, like domes and this kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm a little baffled. I'm trying to figure it out. He goes, yeah, would you like to talk? I go, sure. And he goes, here's my address. Come and see me. And I go to this house, that's near downtown Honolulu. Mm-hmm. And up on the side there. I walk in. I go, you live here? And he goes, yeah. And I'm looking around. There's no furniture. There's nothing but filing cabinets and stacks of books and massive computers. I'm like, sure you do. I don't say anything. He goes, so let me show you a few things. And so he taught me tons of stuff. And I kept meeting people like that over and over and over. I mean, it was literally, I became aware it's like God steering people to me. So, one time I was on a small boat from Ford Island and the guy sitting next to me, right after I met another guy, a homeless guy. I used to try to get up in front of AIDS conferences in Hawaii and talk about the various cures and things that I had discovered in my research. And, because they were having banquets to raise money for a cure. And I go, which one of the 16 that I know of do you want? I'll give it to you for free. I'll give it to you for free. They're like, what? And then, afterwards, people would, maybe 4 or 5 people would come up and talk to me. That was it. And there was a reoccurring guy, this homeless guy that just knew tons of stuff. And he finally one day came up and he said, so, would you be interested in meeting somebody off the Eldridge? I'll go, yeah, I would. He goes, well, give me your phone number. I'll have him call you. And the guy called me and I drove over to the island to the Kaneohe side and met this guy. And he showed me his picture on the Eldridge. I could see, he's much older now, because it's in World War II and now we're in the 90s, that it was him. And he said, you know, do you have the old movie with the kind of pinkish footage when they're showing that, you know, it happened? He goes, that's actually original footage. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, freeze frame it. I'm on the port side by the fantail. And I did, and it was him. And then, you know, I talked to him for a few hours, and he told me about Lemuria and Atlantis and all kinds of ancient history and all kinds of stuff. And then I was on that small boat that I was mentioning, and the guy was sitting on the other side of the fantail for me. It was kind of symbolic based on what the previous guy. And I just had this feeling, you know, you get a feeling that, you know, this guy is here for a reason and he's going to talk to you. Sure enough. And, you know, he didn't have a right hand. And, you know, I didn't mean to be staring like it, you know, he has no hand, but he looked at me and he goes, in answer to your question, I hadn't said anything, right? It was in answer to the question, it's yes. I didn't say anything. He goes, but you thought it.
Yeah.
I go, you're telepathic. And he goes, yes. So I said, oh, so that, and he goes, yes. So, you know, I thought, you know, so we actually had a fairly telepathic conversation where I'd think, and he'd just go, yes, no, okay, yeah, you know, exactly. That he'd been on there, he'd lost his hand because it passed through the bulkhead, and the bulkhead being steel and him being organic. When the ship came back, his hand was through the bulkhead and he lost his hand, and it could pass through because it's not organic and he is. And so there's a resonant envelope around organic objects that non-organic objects don't have. So if it's your pure energy, you can pass through them. But if it goes back solid, then if you're still in it, then it's going to be in you. And he said, I'm actually fortunate because quite a few men laying in their bunks wound up halfway through their bunk and they died. Or the decks, fortunately, on the ship were teak. And so we didn't sink into the decks, but it was horrific what happened. And so he, you know, shared a lot with me, and it just kept going like that. And, you know, then the guy that would, you know, I found out he was CIA, and I was telling him things that I had researched and come to conclusions. And he was just like, how do you know all this stuff? I go, just pops into my head. He goes, what? Some of what you're saying that you've talked with me about, I've had to go to my boss, who went to his boss, and it's true. How do you know? I mean, you can't know that. It's not even possible. I don't know. It just pops in my head. You know, so I've found out since that was God popping in my head, but it was amazing to just the journey of the last 30 some years for me has just completely changed the nature of who I am. And I've watched the nature of the world change in the process to where, you know, like I said, thousands of people listening to me, 10 people ask, you see one again and again, and that's it. And most people, you wind up talking to them. I was trying to wake up people, and I get a hand in my face and a roll of the eyes, and you're a mate. You're out of your mind, dude. In Western terminology, you know, depending on where you're at. I was in Australia. I've been in Hobart. I've been in a lot of places, and nowhere did people listen to me. They're like, "You're out of your mind. You're out of your gourd. You're crazy. You know, you're a loon, mate." You know. So, but now it's phenomenal to watch the difference of people, and, you know, people like yourselves, and there's people all over the world. The Great Awakening is not something that's just a loose term. It's for real. You can see people are waking up and wanting to know the truth and learning the truth. So it's just such a privilege and an honor to be here at this time.
Oh, it is, Jim. It is. You mentioned the TRB. Did I say that right? The TRB. I actually, so this has been happening the last few weeks, but definitely the last 2 nights. So I'm just currently down here doing a bit of kind of a tour and a bit of holidaying, some work and film, but down here on the south coast of England in Bournemouth currently. And it's a beautiful place, and it's in between the Isle of Wight, which is the southern island, I'm sure you know, of England, and then you've got Old Harry Rocks, which is a stack of rocks in the sea. But it's a beautiful kind of crescent of golden sand that goes about 10, 11 miles all the way from Hengistbury Head Beach, which is 185, Donald John Trump, all the way through to Old Harry Rocks, which is 167, and that was the 167th day of the year that he came down the escalators with Melania. But I've been seeing, so right now we've had a half moon, and it's now kind of just gone past it, but it's a beautiful moon in the evening. And I've been looking, and I'm seeing look like stars move around. So some have said that it could be scout ships, but I saw a distinct one last night where it started moving slowly away from the moon, and then it stopped, and then it just basically acted like, like a stationary object for the rest of the night, as far as I could tell. And I noticed these lights dancing around the beach about a mile or so away, and I wasn't sure. There's a possibility they could have been drone craft, but I don't think so because of the speed that they were accelerating at. And it almost felt like they could hear me, talking to them telepathically, because I was saying, "Okay, show me something," because they were dancing kind of along the beachfront. So there's lights and huts and other things. But then suddenly just jumped right up horizontally straight up into the sky, and it was green, and then sometimes it would flash red, and then there was a second one that would sometimes join it, and then again tonight I saw what seemed to be the same sort of thing, but this time out in the ocean, literally below the moon, and they kind of flicker off, and then they'd be in a slightly different place, and then all of a sudden, within a split second, they'd be whizzing, which looks like quarter of a mile onto the shoreline of the other side of the coast, and then they kind of scarper down the coastline a few miles and kind of be dancing around, and then they'd whiz up again and then kind of disappear. And I don't know what they are, but I don't know if that sounds familiar to you with any of the things, or the number of things you've seen. But I seem to be seeing quite a few unidentified objects now over the last month or so, but these new ones, the green ones, and just kind of appearing right below the beautiful half moon over the sea, and then it's doing this kind of back and forth, and then boom, straight onto the shoreline, and then whizzing down and accelerating away. So I don't know what they are. I couldn't hear anything like blades of a rotor or anything like that. I don't know if they were lasers. They didn't seem to be. They seemed to be something kind of more majestic than that.
Yeah, so I've actually on several occasions gone to airports. If you get a large airport that doesn't have activity in the night and is outside of a big city, so like an international airport, there's some of them you can do this where you can go sit, and they'll drive out there, and I'll sit and have a tarp I can throw over myself in case the authorities come up and see if it's an abandoned vehicle, and they look at the light. If you're in there, they'll knock on the window. I don't want to be interrupted, so I'll sit there from sunset to sunrise, and I've actually seen ships literally come up on top of the runway, like phase up, or in some cases the runways, depending on what country you're in, may lower, like a aircraft carrier, where you see the ramp go down and come back up again, and you'll see a craft on it, like a triangle craft, a TR3, or some bigger crafts, and then they'll start to glow, usually pink, yellow, or green, and then it'll suddenly turn up. It'll turn up on end at about anywhere between a 90 degrees perpendicular, perfect perpendicular, 70, 80, 60, somewhere in there. And then you don't want to blink, because you'll see, just like in Star Trek, all the stars will stretch towards the craft. And then just the craft literally stretches in the opposite direction towards the stars. And then the stars snap back like they're made out of rubber. The sky snaps back. And it's like, it's gone. I mean, it takes all of about 3 seconds. It's just like the sound they do in Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's just like that. But no sound. It's just quiet. It's just, I have my window rolled down. All I hear is crickets, and all of a sudden it's just stretching. It's blink of an eye. It's gone. I'm like, went into hyperdrive, engage the hyperdrive, Scotty. I'm like, wow, that really does exist. So you can see that a lot of airports actually have bases and stuff underneath them all over the world.
Okay. Is it TR3 or TRB? TR3, is it?
TR3, the older ones were the TR3Bs. They're way past that. That's the model, B, C, D,
I know they
G, or whatever they're on now.
Are they
Yes.
kind of triangular in shape? Okay, yeah. Wow. I'm actually considering that tomorrow night. There's a beautiful beach, which is really kind of private. There's no light around it. I'm thinking of maybe doing that tomorrow night. Just camp out and just be out there and just see what comes, because
Yeah, a lot of the craft do have telepathic monitoring. So if you're getting thought communications, ask him for him to go into hyperdrive for you. Could you snap out back again? So I could see a hyperdrive launch.
I'll do that.
Kind of beautiful to watch.
Yeah, well, these ones are because they always are. First of all, it started with noticing, my first people first started pointing them out to me in Arizona in last fall. I was over in the States, and Arizona, Scottsdale, so it's kind of a hotbed of activity for UFOs. And I was with two people, and one of them pointed out and said, "Look at that top," and that she knew where these were, and it would blink off, it would blink and then come back on again, blink off again, and then she did it with 3 or 4 times. I'm like, okay, and it was very subtle but elegant. And then a few nights later, on my own, at the house I was staying with the other person, I'd go out in the night and I'd look up at the stars, and I could find Orion and Pleiades and Taurus and Plough, and I saw Cassiopeia, the W, and it was probably half an hour before sunrise, and I just looked up. It was the first thing I looked up at. I saw Cassiopeia, but I noticed that 2 of the stars seemed particularly, I mean, the constellations out there are very clear and bright anyway, but 2 of the stars looked even brighter than normal. And then all of a sudden, one of them dimmed off. I was like, it's one of those. And then the second one dimmed off, and they didn't come back on. I was like, okay, thank you, I got that. And then my friend Mark Atwood, who's here in the UK, well, he's English, but he's based in Ireland. He goes out and sees the ships all the time. And he talked about doing the telepathic communication with them. And he said, find a star that you like and focus on it. And I've noticed, I think it's Arcturian or Arcturus. Yeah, Arcturus, I believe. And that one seems to kind of stand out to me. So I look at that, and then I noticed a lot of activity around it, and it will be kind of these slow moving ships. But then sometimes get a kind of a bright, almost like a flash, kind of gets brighter, and then it goes and kind of comes and goes as quickly as it did. But these green ones I've just seen in the last 2 nights, because I was kind of thinking, it'd be nice to see some kind of, different different ones, and I'm grateful for all of them. But yeah, it sounds like from what you said about the airports that I should definitely try the hyperspeed thing. Yeah, the operational warp speed. I think you've confirmed that, Gene. I should definitely go out to that beach tomorrow night and just see what comes, see what I can bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always ask before I do is if this is my highest interest and the highest interest of all life ever, and its highest service to the God of all creation. So I make sure I'm getting good guys. Are you talking the same Mark Atwood that's Adventures in a Cosmic Suit?
Yes, yeah, that's it. It's my buddy Mark. Yeah. You know
him? Yeah, he's fairly well published. He's got books, right?
I don't know if he's got. I know he's got his channel. He might have a book. I'm not aware of that. I know he writes a lot in terms of poetry as well, and does a lot of great videos on his show. But he may. I don't know. I'm not sure. You might know. He may. I haven't heard he's got a book, but it doesn't mean he hasn't. He might be writing one. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's Mark. Adventures in a meat suit, cosmic suit. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 that come to mind is let's see, the ancient path of the sun, and then ancient solstice, which is kind of like uncovering the spiritual meaning of the solstices and equinoxes.
Oh, these are books.
Yeah, that he wrote.
Did he?
Yeah.
Cool, he's kept that quiet from me. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Well, Mark, if you're listening, buddy, I know you tell me about all your other stuff, but I didn't know about that one. So yeah, there's only one Mark Atwood. So that must be yeah. But he's the one that kind of I saw it in Arizona, but he kind of made it accessible the last kind of last 6 weeks or so for me, and it works.
No, I've studied that. I got interested in that because studying the equinox and solstice, everything the deep state does is in relation to the orientation of stars and stuff.
Yeah.
Like the dogs in the US are laid out on Orion, and I can't remember the other one. And I know in Europe they're laid out on Gemini and another one too. I can't remember right now, but studying the solstice and the equinoxes, and it's actually in the military. I was always wondering why the US military, our funding starts on April 16th, and the taxes in the US are due the 15th. And I realized, and I researched this, and I found out that the year actually begins then. The end of the year is April 15th, and the ancient Tamil calendar actually had the year starting on April the 17th, and it's retrograding slowly. It's now April 16th. It's when the equator of the Earth crosses the equatorial ecliptic of the sun, and then the seasons flip in the hemispheres, and that's when the year flips. And so, in the military, we have funding start on April 16th, and then you have semi-annual on October the 16th. And I was like, why in the heck? And why do they collect taxes on April 15th? Well, it's the end of the real year. Nothing really starts, in the case of where we are in the hemisphere we're in the middle of the winter in January.
Yeah.
We're starting more winter, more cold. I mean, it's like I was stationed out of Holy Lock, and I mean, that's the most ruthless climate I've ever been in. I got off with my sea bag walking down with the submarine, and I get out in town, and it's the first time I've seen it blowing so hard.
Where's that? Scotland?
Yeah, Scotland.
Okay.
Yeah, I was stationed there for 3 years, and I would walk. Got out in town, it'd be pouring rain, really cold, and I would watch an icicle go perpendicular, out of the side of a building's wall. I was blowing so hard. I was trying to get down the pier with my sea bag. It's blowing. You're freezing cold. It's icy and wet. Oh my gosh. It was like crazy cold. And then, it's weird because I come up at 3 a.m. One time you get there and the sun's up. I go, is it 3 in the afternoon? I'm like messed up with my time. They go, no, it's 3. Topside watch go, no, it's 3 a.m. Oh, next time I'm there, I come up 3 p.m. and it's dark. I go, am I messed up? No, it's 3 in the afternoon. I'm like, oh, because you're getting closer to where the sun's dipping more, like up in Alaska in the US. And I'm like, oh, okay, but it's weird. But the weather is it reminds me of, there used to be a radio station here in the US where they had doctors. It was called Dr. Demendo, and they had a newscast from England. They said the weather today will be blowing 40 miles an hour with rain and freezing cold, and in short, it'll be normal for this time of the year. I was like, that's right. So it was just, but I did love, got up to, when we go into Scotland, we come into Glasgow, and then they take us by boat and ferry down to Holy Lock. And then I got out and we did tours, and I went all the way up through to Edinburgh and saw castles all over. It's beautiful, the Highlands and all of that. And then I got to London one time and walked around a little bit and saw that. So I love the UK, and it's beautiful. And I would love to see more, especially get up into Ireland and Wales, which I haven't seen anything of, but I'd love to. You have a beautiful.
When you come over, I'll show you around. Yeah, because I used to live in Scotland, so I know.
Love that.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I went to call my girlfriend way before cell phones. And so I went to call my girlfriend at a phone booth. I needed to find a phone booth. So I asked this guy coming up the street, can you tell me where a phone booth is? And he said something. I have no clue. I couldn't even make out even a syllable. And I go, wow, I must have misheard something. Excuse me, what'd you say? He said, I recognize the same intonations. I'm like, Thank you. Like, what the heck was that? Remind me of Robin Williams. Nothing harder to understand than a Scotsman, unless it's a Scotsman that's drunk. I was like, that's true.
There's plenty of them. Yeah, I was in Greenock first, which is on the Forth of Clyde, the River Clyde, and then a number of parts in Glasgow, and I loved it in Scotland. But yeah, even for me being English, I had to pick up the dialect. Yeah, some parts are stronger than others in terms of the accent, and the weather in the summer it's glorious because it's sunny and the nights are short, so the days are long, and then the winter, yeah, like you said, very cold and drab. And then London, my place in London is just around the corner from the Sherlock Holmes Museum on Baker Street. So it's about 200 yards from Sherlock Holmes, 22-1B Baker Street. But yeah, London's great with all of its places and things and the energy there. And I'm sure there's a lot of things, like you said, that aren't good or haven't been good. But on the flip side, I'm sure there's a lot of good things taking place or about to take place there as well at some point. So I saw one of your shows a few weeks ago, Gene, and I did some numbers on it, and something stood out to me, and it was let me get this phrase correct because I wanted to ask you about this. Yes, here it is. Interesting as well. What's that?
Go ahead, Tom. I was going to comment about your friend Mark and his study of the ancient path of the sun. And, if you look at the path of the sun, if you were to put a camera and take a picture every day at the exact same time, in electronics on an O-scope, we call it a lysidue. You get this kind of bizarre twisted figure 8 pattern. I think they call it an anella. But the sun makes where it is exactly the same time every day for a year, it makes kind of an elongated, stretched out figure 8 in the sky. It's really fascinating. So you might share that with him. That might be something he'd be interested in. So go ahead, and what were you saying?
Okay. Well, you talk about the figure of 8. So today's the Lion's Day. It's August 8th, 8th month. Well, the 8th month as we know it now. 8/8, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And 8/8 is Trump and it's also Scotland, so it's appropriate we were talking about Scotland. And Edinburgh, the capital is 8/8, and so Scotland, Edinburgh, 8/8 is 176, which is Back to the Future. But we talked about water earlier as well. So interesting enough, gene decode comes to 67, which is water, which is exchange, which is reset. And your episode from a few weeks ago, this caught my attention. Time travel police. You were talking about the time travel police, and there's actually a great, musician, DJ, if you want to call it, on iTunes, and it's called Time Cop 1983. And the music on that is really kind of trancey and ambient, and kind of got this great electric pop kind of 80s feel to it. And I really like that. But it stood out to me when you talked about the time travel police, because it actually comes to time police is 47, which is John. Police is 60, add them together is 107. Travel is 78, Kennedy. So time police, 107, quantum. Travel, 78, Kennedy. If you add them all together, time travel police comes to 185, Donald John Trump. So that stood out to me when I was watching your episode. I don't know, maybe we could talk about a little bit about that as well, because I found that I hadn't heard that before, and I thought it was a fascinating subject.
One of the Blessed for Service coordinators is working on a decode that'll be Baron von Trump and John Titor, and I'm sure you're familiar with that to some degree.
Yeah.
The time travel, and there's a book that came out that Trump went back in time along with Baron, and that they made changes, and then now I'm learning that Tesla actually got a younger version of himself, and he's still here. And so we'll be doing decodes on that on the deep dives as well. But it's really fascinating that you mentioned that. It's just like Back to the Future and all of that, and many symbologies in that series of movies that are in there. there was a lot of stuff in there. It would symbolize 911. It symbolized all kinds of things in that series of movies. And it alluded to all of that as well that you're just referencing, which also, of course, ties to the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk project that I was referring to earlier. So that's another whole line of ongoing decodes that we'll be doing. Some of the coordinators on Blessed for Service are working on. We're kind of taking it to the next level. Is they used to, they still do answer questions people send into the Gmail that I set up years ago, carlosensei64@gmail.com. But now we're kind of taking, instead of answering questions one by one, which they'll still do that, but they also are going to where you answer questions by, like what I'm doing, interviews or deep dives on the back channel, the deep dives back channel. So you can put out the information and answer people's questions in the thousands at a time. So kind of another level of service to where you can help people to learn things. Very good level of information altogether, and then people can watch it over and over instead of having to do one question and that spawns another question. They can do the research, have the links, the information, and all of that there.
Excellent. Talking of your email, actually, I meant to say at the beginning, thank you to Anna Marins, a friend of both of ours that connected us together, and also Scott McCabe was working on that as well. So shout out to Anna and Scott for that, and thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Also, you just mentioned then about a young Nikola Tesla that's still with us. Can we talk more about him? Like, where is he? What is he doing? Is he maybe kind of in the Truther movement? Is he kind of helping some of us?
He's part of it. Yeah. So he's part of the plan. As you may remember, Tesla was working in, I think it was Manhattan. He was also out in Colorado. He had a place called Warden, where he had developed
Long Island. I've been there.
Long-range transmission using resonance through the crust of the Earth, and that's the classic picture where you see all kinds of lightning bolts around him from a Tesla coil, and then it's throwing it to the sides, and it's believed that what that picture showing is that he actually was able to time travel with that, besides the fact that he could throw that power into the ground 9 miles away, pick it up with crystals, radio crystals. Not Marconi invented radio, it was actually Tesla. And then he would be able to power motors with that from 9 miles. And so he was working with JP Morgan, unfortunately. And that's when, Howard Hughes and everybody got connected in the Van de Graaff, and all of that got connected in Howard Hughes with him, because he tried to bring free energy to the world. If you go to a grid line, in other words, a crystal lattice on a crystal, the Earth being a giant crystal, and you put energy into it at resonant frequency, it'll create a standing wave. Well, if you do that too much at a resonant frequency, unless the crystal is flawless, it'll break like an opera singer with a wine glass. If the wine glass was flawless, it would actually resonate to the point where it became pure energy. It would change the vibration, get so strong that it would change into light. And if you kept going, you'd actually make it get sentient. It would actually start to become aware. And so what Tesla was doing was developing electricity he had longhand calculus figured out the resonant frequency of Earth was, I think it was 50 hertz. And so he picked 60 cycle to resonate it so that it would still be able to resonate and create a standing wave, which is now known as a scalar wave, and be able to give the whole world free energy. And when JP Morgan realized that he could actually do it, he created an earthquake at first because he was out of phase. And then at Warden, he actually it was near Colorado Springs in Colorado. He shut the Colorado Springs power grid down because he was out of phase. And so it backfed into the power systems there. So once he lined it up, they were actually getting gain from the power station and that they were generating from his Wardenclyffe facility. And so when JP Morgan, he proved to him that he could do that. The plan was to harness Niagara Falls energy from Niagara Falls with hydrogenerators, send it to Manhattan Island and power the world. And JP Morgan goes, well, exactly how am I going to meter that and sell it to people? Goes, well, that's why it's called free energy. And it's like, well, that's not very efficient as far as economically. And of course, Tesla was wanting efficient as far as giving people power, because if you give them a way to get energy, you've pretty much solved the majority of problems. You have light at night, you have a way to move, you have a way to power things, to make lights, to turn equipment, to run motors, all kinds of things. And he had actually developed a small motor the size of a hat that developed 50,000 horsepower too. And he had a Pierce Arrow that he put a small delta antenna on the back of the car. And then he had a motor, that motor in it, and he went into a hardware store and got 2 metals and put it in this little box he had. And he drove that, hundreds of miles with no fuel at all. He was just running off of the energy that he was capturing on that, showing that it could be done. And so he learned, JP Morgan cut him off, raided the labs, emptied everything out, and he learned about the deep state. And so with that, then of course, the alliance and the plan, those backing the plan approached him and said, and he was getting old and, dying, essentially poor and a pauper. And they said, so we have technology that we'd like to use your technology, but we can help you to bring it out to the world when the timing is right. And so we're working on a plan to do all that. And that's how he got involved in it. And they brought a younger version of himself forward so he could train his own version of himself. I mean, who's better to understand you than you, but your younger self. Yeah. And he actually had a mentor that I think his name was, if I'm remembering this right, Robert Russell. And he said that
Robert Russell,
he was the true genius. And I've been researching his stuff and I've read it, and it's a totally new paradigm to look at God, to look at physics. I mean, I'm having to let go. I'm reading it a few times and not thinking about it, letting my head decipher it as once I get it all in there. But I mean, he actually had tubes that he was taking an element in, and he said, like Tesla said, everything is based on frequency. So what Russell was doing was changing the frequency and the angular displacement of an element in a tube. And it was now a different element. He even said it's not transmuting it. He didn't transmute it, that an element's what element it is based on its angular displacement and its frequency. And if you change those, it is now a different element. So it's he has a chart of the elements based on angular displacement and frequency in the documents that I've looked at in researching him. And I'm going to be, once I can ever figure this out, I'm going to try to do a decode on it. It's extremely complicated. And Tesla said that his stuff was too advanced for the human race. It shouldn't come out for 2,000 years. It needs to be locked in a vault, probably after his experiences with JP Morgan. And Morgan also was involved in the situation with the Titanic as well, / Olympia, which is another decode that's being worked on. And of course that feeds into Federal Reserve.
Wow. You said, I find this fascinating because I've stayed at the Tesla Hotel, the New Yorker in Manhattan, and I've been to the Warden Cliff facility out in Long Island, but you were referring to the one also out in Colorado, and you were saying that Tesla had the intention to make all the free energy come from New York. I've been getting these downloads, visions of just impressions, thoughts, like you said, it comes into your mind, God gives it to you. I get similar things with numbers and connecting dots. And I've been feeling for a long time that New York is a pivotal point in all of this. Do you feel that perhaps Tesla will still get the opportunity to make New York this power hub of the free energy of the world? Gene, do you think? Because it's the first time I've heard anyone say anything about what you just said, but it totally resonates. It makes sense to me because I've always felt that New York could be this epicenter for the good things coming.
Yeah, I think he was working on Long Island. I think that tower was at Shoreham or something like that. I think that was the name of the area. Shoreham or something.
I've been to the facility. I did a little video on it. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it has the Warden cliff bit and about Tesla on the front, and then I went around the back, and it was kind of just locked up. Couldn't get in. That's Long Island, yeah. But there's also another part in Manhattan. There's a corner. There's the hotel he was in. He was on the 33rd floor, so stayed in when he lived there. It was two units, but they've now put a wall in between so people can stay in where he lived and where his study was. But they were one in the same apartment at the time. But 33, talking about Baron Trump. So if you do the numbers on 33. 30 is 100, 3 is 56, which is also light, which is healing. Add them together, 156 comes to Baron Trump. And it's interesting, with the Baron Trump time travel series books. I always get these connections between Tesla, JFK, and Baron. They seem to kind of resonate quite a lot. And also the 369. So if you do. We were talking at the beginning about bolts of lightning without thunder. So a bolt of lightning is a term in the Back to the Future films with Emmett Brown. Emmett Brown's 148, which is simple gematria, Donald J. Trump, time traveler. But he says a bolt of lightning, says to Marty McFly, says a bolt of lightning. We need a power source, a bolt of lightning. But a bolt of lightning is 171, which is the revaluation. And there's been pictures of a bolt of lightning hitting Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty is 198, which is the resurrection, which is President Trump. But if you do 198 Statue of Liberty plus a bolt of lightning, 171, it comes to 369, it comes to the Tesla numbers. So it's interesting because going back to the DC movies with Cumberbatch as our Sherlock Holmes character, but Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange, yeah. In the previous one to that came out, there was the Spider-Man one. And there was the 3 Spider-Mans, and their timelines all converged at the Statue of Liberty. But lo and behold, Doctor Strange was there, and he was doing all the portal dimension stuff. So I wonder, New York, Manhattan, they all seem to be, Statue of Liberty all seems to be somehow connected in some way.
Yeah, from what I understand, the Statue of Liberty is on part of that lattice line, so ley line, in other words. But
okay.
It's all tied together.
Yeah, and they made it look as well because it's oxidized, it's all green. But in the film, the Spider-Man Coming Home movie with Doctor Strange, it was all golden. Maybe just clean copper, but it could have. I was getting a feeling it was indicative of the golden age and. Maybe they've done what you said that Russell was doing, able to change from one element to another, because it looked pretty golden in that last kind of final scene of the Spider-Man movie. 369. Fascinating. When do you think we're going to start to kind of? One other question about Tesla. So the new Tesla, the younger Tesla, he's still with us. You say, Gene, is he known to some of us in the movement? Like, you, me, maybe others. Is he kind of?
Unless you're way up there, I don't think you'd know. And that's, I haven't verified this. I've just in my research turned it up. So, it's based on my research on the plan and the Trump stuff and the time travel stuff and the Tesla and Von de Graaff and Warden Cliff and JP Morgan and kind of tying strings together and Howard Hughes and all of that, tying all of those strings together, and there's information leading to that information that's being put out that's the case. So I haven't actually known anybody that's seen him in the flesh, so to speak. So I can't say, there he is. That's him. And I don't know of anybody that said, that's him. I think you're at a level of clearance for the alliance that to be able to say that. Nobody's going to say that until all of this is said and done, and we have free energy and all this stuff, and this cabal is gone.
I got you.
And I think
hear you.
he actually, the facility he had in Colorado Springs, I think he left that in January of 1900, and he was throwing stuff anywhere between 9, 15, and 26 miles away on his facility there outside of Colorado Springs.
Where in Colorado Springs is it? Is it near Garden of the Gods? Because I know Colorado Springs quite well, some parts of it. Or is it further down near the Air Force?
I haven't actually located precisely. I think you can go still see the lab. Let me look that up. Hold on. Let me see if I can find that by looking it up where that actually was. Just keep saying Colorado Springs here.
Yeah.
Colorado Springs, Colorado. Yeah, where in Colorado Springs? Thank you.
Yeah.
I see what I'm doing. I need to go all and not images. Let's see. 1323 Motor City Drive, Colorado Springs, something. Oh, that might be the museum for that. Let me put where in here.
Cheyenne Mountain's close, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
That's just by Pikes Peak, not far from there. The tin mine, and yeah.
Oh, that was the Tesla company, that Motor City thingy. That's Elon Musk's company. Okay, let's see. Nikola Tesla Laboratory in Colorado Springs. Knob Hill, on a small grassy hill in what is now known as Knob Hill.
Knob Hill, what? KNOB?
Yeah, knob, like a knob on a door.
Okay, Knob Hill. Huh. That seems to sound familiar, actually, Knob Hill. So maybe there's another one. Interesting. You talked as well about so Christopher Nolan is a film director. I'm sure you probably know who he is, and he did the Batman Dark Knight trilogy series. He did Inception. He did Interstellar. He did Dunkirk. He did Tenet recently about time reversal.
Interstellar is actually a timeline in which the Armageddon timeline, in which life on Earth starts to wither and die. And so the human race needs to leave the Earth and find a new home. And that's coming off of Armageddon timeline.
Okay. And we're not on that timeline, is that right?
They're currently splitting apart. We're not, you and I aren't talking on that line right now, no.
But others in the 3D, for want of a better phrase, are
really? currently intermingled, but pulling apart.
So there is going to be a physical separation of
timeline.
How do you see that?
They'll eventually be no longer sharing the same space-time continuum. They'll be completely divergent.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's how timelines separate, as the masses assume a overall choice quantum, that resonance of a certain occurrence and a future event that they want to experience. It stabilizes the line. And so then the line takes on quantum singularity, as in a quantum resonant singularity separate from the old line, and where the angular displacement of the quantum vibration is unique. And that at that point, the two lines are separate.
So that means some people that we know on the Earth will be in a different Earth and will be on another one.
Correct. And that's the one we're speaking was Interstellar. So that'll be springing out of the Armageddon line. We're not on the Armageddon line now because people are choosing a different path where you don't need that kind of destruction. They don't need that kind of, it's a choice. I mean, if you need to experience it, you can. I don't need to experience it, so I don't choose it. So your choice is where you are. You actually, they learned with the Montauk Project that you can't get rid of a timeline completely ever. And so you can alter it to some degree, but you can't, and you can steer it. And that's what they've been doing for a very long time, is things like 911, and that is to steer our perceptions so that we create the timeline for them, because they don't have the capacity to do it in reality. They need the quantum or quorum of people to think a certain way to create, and that's why Tavistock Institute did long-range preconditioning, and they make the movies to steer the thoughts so that you will help them to create the future they want of their new world order. And so a fair world order is now developing, and where you have a gold standard and getting back to real money that's tangible in your hand, and free technologies, energy technologies, and anti-gravitics, and everything comes out like was the original timeline before they started messing with everything. And so as you make a choice, if you're significantly making choices that are not matching the quantum of the Earth reality, parallel the universe you're in, you actually move. You'll actually, when your choices, not what choices you make, but the why of the choices. What is your overall baseline of why you choose what you choose? That has a frequency, energy, angular frequency, and an angular displacement, like Robert Russell is saying. And what that does is, if you become too divergent to the line you're on, it creates you to slingshot across time lines. So you actually move towards where you resonate, and that you have a velocity to that, or a momentum. And as that momentum propels you, of course, the momentum winds down and it takes you so far, but you will actually go past what you resonate. And timelines are kind of like sticky. So you'll stick at a line. Let's say you're becoming much more service to self than you were. You're going to go to where you are way more than what the overall quantum of this line reflects. Then you're going to slingshot to a line that's more in alignment with the frequency you're resonating at. But you'll have a momentum that'll carry you slightly past that line to a line that's actually worse, more service to self than you are being. And so what that actually does is your frequency will be significantly higher than everybody else, and it'll mesh into the quantum of that Earth, and people will start to become more service to others, because you're more, even though you're becoming more service to self, you're more service to others than the rest of that people there. But if you do it the other way and you become more service to others to where you're way beyond what the quorum here is, then you slingshot to a much more service to others line. And again, you have momentum. So it carries you past it, because the Earth, the multiverse is created by God. That's, the God that created all of everything is compassionate and service to others. And so that is the overall tendency of the multiverse. So it resonates that way. So you will slingshot past the line you resonate, and you'll wind up in a line that's far more service to others than you are. And that'll upgrade you, because that's the nature of the multiverse itself, because the nature of the creator is that way. So positive outweighs negative always, because it's the nature of creation itself. It's the resonant understructure, or the quantum resonant understructure coming from the singularity that is the creator of all things. And that's why if you read the works of Nassim Haramein, and he's resolved Einstein's 6 differential equations down to a singular eloquent equation, meaning that it's algebraic now, not calculus, in which it shows that why there's quantum entanglement, which is there's a singularity at the center of every atom, every sun, every planet. And that singularity is the same singularity. So everything's quantumly entangled, and everything's coming out from that singularity and then returning as a gravity wave back into that singularity. Gravity is actually a particle wave that pushes, it's not a pull. So it's returning, it's coming out as light from the Holy Spirit, and at the speed of light. And then once we interact with the creation it creates from the creator, And we have our thoughts, feelings, and emotions and desires of what we want to experience. And that's what the cabal's been farming. Then it returns with that desire and that projection to the singularity that is God. And so then it returns into every singularity, which is the singularity at the center of every single particle, planet, etc. And then at 8 times that. So because it's a squared function, it's 64. They used to think gravity was instantaneous, because if you look at where the sun is, where the gravity's coming is 8 minutes separate. And because it takes 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to the earth. So they thought gravity was instantaneous. It's actually going 64 times the speed of light, gravity waves. And so when it returns, when they first were breaking the nucleus of the atom, they said, well, if you look at hydrogen, that's fine. You have 1 proton. But if you look at helium, you have 2. And they're both positively charged. So why doesn't it explode? Why doesn't the Coulomb force that, would cause it to blow apart, both having the same charge, they should repel. So there must be an incredibly strong force binding the nucleus, especially when you get to things like uranium, with many, 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 many protons in there. It should blow apart very easily. So there must be a strong force binding the nucleus of the atom, or they just decided to name it the strong nuclear force. It must be really strong to overcome the Coulomb force. And so what Harriman has shown that it's actually, and they couldn't understand it, so they just named it that way. And they also couldn't understand why you get 1/2 of a Planck distance away from that force, the nucleus of the atom, it drops to 0 because the particle wave hasn't gone in there yet. So the binding force hasn't coalesced as an event horizon going into the nucleus of the atom, into the singularity at the center. And so that's actually what cold fusion does, or low energy nuclear reactions, is they lower the Coulomb force. It's called lowering the fence or dropping the fence, or it has many terms, but you're reducing the Coulomb force itself, and that causes it to readily take up particles. And so that creates low energy fusion. Plants actually do it all the time. That's how they create what they are, the mass of what they are. They're replicating elements taken up from the soil, combining it with light and lowering the Coulomb force to produce what they are. Otherwise, if you saw a sequoia, you'd have a crater around it if it was all being removed from the dirt, if all of that tons and tons of wood. And that's part of why the expanding Earth theory was thrown out, is what's the binding, what is the causing the expansion of the Earth? If it's expanding, what's causing it? You have to have, Carey and Maxwell and some of these pioneers were postulating that the gravitational constant must be dropping and impulses. Well, that we've now found that's not true. So by the time the continental drift theory came up, that was the case. So they threw it out the window. But in actuality, plants are doing cold fusion, increasing the mass of the Earth. Plus, they didn't realize at the time that hundreds of thousands of tons of meteors from dust sized all the way up to the big stuff are falling on Earth every day. And so the Earth is increasing mass, which means the gravity, which is an effect of mass, is going up. And so as it goes up, it's increasing the gravitational constant, not the constant, but the gravitational force of the Earth and the mass of the Earth. And so eventually, if you had a solid crust over the entire thing, and then you have rain coming down and it's eroding the mountains down into long freshwater seas, that on a single crust, it's going to get weak at the center of those seas and it'll break apart. And then you have the necessary increase in gravity to cause it to spin out now. And so that increases the expansion. And so looking at, back to the reducing of the Coulomb force, that then allows for not only cold nuclear fusion, it also is another driving force. And so it all ties together. And so, even when you're looking at time travel and some of these things, you're looking at the same thing. But again, because they don't understand things, they make it up. And then they have these lies that they tell you, like strong nuclear force weak nuclear force, color force, and all these things, when all it is gravity and electromagnetics. That's real simple. And it all comes, that's why Tesla and Russell were going into frequency. Everything's frequency, the secret of 369 that you were talking about before, Tom. And so, it's fascinating to research it all. So I'll just take off on a tangent there.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yes, I was saying, so the Christopher Nolan Interstellar and other films, and one of the ones he did make was The Prestige, which featured Nikola Tesla and the Warden facility in Colorado. That was in that film. And you mentioned another film, Titanic. And Titanic was made by James Cameron, who made Terminator 2, Terminator 1, Avatar. But somehow I feel there's a connection between, because Howard Hughes also, I believe, got into the movie business or wanted to do so. And Christopher Nolan, I met him at a BAFTA event before 2020, and I asked him about, because he wrote a script about Howard Hughes, and he says it's the best script he's ever written, but he put it on the shelf because Martin Scorsese brought out The Aviator film with DiCaprio about 22 years ago, whenever it was. So Christopher Nolan parked that script, but he says he wants to revisit it at some point. And I've got a feeling that Howard Hughes, James Cameron, and Christopher Nolan are somehow connected. And I wondered if you've got any thoughts on that, or any knowledge of that, because you mentioned, Titanic. We spoke about Terminator 2, and James Cameron's a strange one because he really doesn't do many films. He kind of popped out of nowhere, created Terminator, then did Terminator 2, did Titanic, he did Avatar, and these are massive blockbuster films, but he doesn't do anything for years and years and years. And Christopher Nolan's got this connection with Howard Hughes, and he did the script with, on him. And I just wonder if somehow those guys are connected through timelines or time travel with Tesla and maybe Russell and others. I'm just wondering if any insight or commentary on that at all. It's just something that I thought in the last few months. It felt to me that they were connected somehow.
So maybe you mean a different Prestige. The one I remember was one where it was two rival magicians. I didn't realize there was one about Tesla.
Yeah, that's it. The rival magicians, yes. And so it's about the rival magicians, but there's a part, there's another piece to the story within the same film. David Bowie played Tesla. So he was showing Hugh Jackman, the two magicians, he was showing him, I guess, the Tesla, the quantum kind of trickery, basically, able to produce things, mass produce them. So he was producing these hats.
Oh, I'll have to go back and watch it.
Yeah, it was like a subset within the story, yeah. So it wasn't purely about Tesla, so I probably described it incorrectly. But yeah, the main thing was about two rival magicians, Hugh Jackman, who I actually met the same night as I met Christopher Nolan, interestingly enough, in the same area, but he was doing something else. And then there was, and then Batman, Christian Bale. They were the two rival magicians, but David Bowie was Tesla, probably the second part of the film. Yes.
And then the Titanic, I wasn't referring to the movie. I'm referring to the actual event of the Titanic, which was actually the Olympia, and how that ties to the Federal Reserve.
Got it.
JP Morgan and Jekyll Island and all of that.
Yeah. Interesting enough. So our friend Scott McKay did a piece with Ed Griffin just a few weeks ago, and he's the one that basically kind of opened my eyes a long time ago, almost 17, 18, maybe 20 years ago, about the creature from Jekyll Island, and I did the numbers. I did the numbers on that, so it comes to 310 actually, which comes to the quantum financial system. So it was interesting, the creature from Jekyll Island, the thing that basically robbed and hoovered mankind's wealth before their eyes. Excuse me. The flip side of that, the quantum financial system, is 310 as well. Also, I know you're a man of faith as well, Gene, and Malachi 3:10, one of the last verses in the Bible, in the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi 3:10 talks about, and there's different translations, different versions of it, but basically, it seems to be describing Jasara and Nasara, because it says about the windows of heaven, how the Lord will pour out a blessing upon the people, that there won't be enough room to receive it. And when you said I think you said it was 1,400 zeros or something like that at the beginning of the conversation. I mean, that's a huge blessing. But it's interesting, the Bible verse, it's Malachi 3:10, and 3:10 is the quantum financial system when you spell out the words in the simple gematria. But on the flip side of that, it's also the creature from Jekyll Island, because so maybe Ed Griffin knew that as he was choosing the title, or got given it, by God. And how many zeros was it you said at the beginning? 14? Was it 1,400 or something like that? 114?
Well, in that document, of the various many page after page after page of 1 or 2 or 3 line listings, depending on how many zeros are in the account. One of them, the highest one I saw was 8 times 10 to the, accounting the zeros, times 10 to the 114th power. There was 105th and 102nd and quite a few of those. And then, smaller denominations that I could actually name numbers like, 5.52 quintillion or 52. One of them was 52 decillion dollars. Wow. So numbers I actually know that I named. But beyond, once I got to those numbers, decillion, I'm like, this is getting to just point where it's easier to just express it in powers of 10, being mathematically minded as I am, and having it the time. It's 3 pages of that, of just 2 lines or 3 or 4 lines of listings of the values in the bank accounts to add up all of the zeros in all of the accounts. And then I'm thinking, if you did that based on how many times you see hundreds or 90s or 50s, you're probably up to 10 to the 1000th power.
Wow. It's almost, I was thinking this the other night, actually. I was out on the beach. I've had thoughts about this before, but it was kind of, it was kind of prominent again. And I was just beginning to feel, in terms of like air, we all breathe air, and we all recycle that and share it amongst us constantly, and with the earth and the plants and everything else. And it feels like in the future, in terms of the quantum, in terms of the wealth system and gold, it will be like air. It just won't. You won't even. It's almost like you won't notice that. Well, you will notice that, but you almost won't. Yes, and it feels like it would just be kind of limitless, just like air. Just one question before we go, Gene. It's been really fantastic having you on. You talked about you talked about Israel, you talked about the Vatican and all these places around the globe. I know you've mentioned it before, but I wondered if you had any brief commentary on Utah and Salt Lake Temple, the more kind of home of Mormonism. Where did those tunnels, how far did they reach? Did they go all the way to the Vatican?
Yeah, so my decode on that, I'm going to redo, but you've got a lot of stuff out in Utah, as well as huge underground facilities with craft and various other things in them, as well as a lot of things tied to the Mormon temple. Of course, the Salt Lake is pretty much mostly gone. Has been drained over a very, very long time. I think that's pilfering the water off planet again. And then the Mormon church is involved at the higher levels into like Kennecott copper. There's a dump under there and all of that stuff. So that'll be, I have to update everything I'm doing due to having deep dives soon. I'll be able to, before when I put it out on a surface channel, kind of the way I think of it being submarines, out in front of the world, I didn't go into what's in the dump. So now I can do that. Like like down in the southern Colorado, for example, under Mount Blanca, that would be Dracos, Zeta Reticuli, etc. If you go a little bit north of that to the Great Sand Dunes, that's the ant people that were from off-world that dug all that, and the sand comes from that. And I went into that previously on a decode, but I'll be doing much deeper into that kind of thing. So I'll be going from all the states, and then I'll go to Canada, and then I'll go to Europe and the UK and all of that. And I've got maps and all kinds of stuff. And I'll also be putting out maps where we're mapping out just using earthquakes at 3, 5, and 10 kilometers without where you have surface waves without the deep, the surface waves without the deep waves, the P waves. Yeah. So we'll be doing that as well and adding that all up. And then there's videos out now that weren't out before. Like I saw one of a guy that was a sniper, and he worked at S4, which is part of the S4, S6, Dulce, all that kind of, or Area 51, I think it is, sorry, complex. And so his job was just to shoot somebody if he got a red light coming in, because the fences and stuff don't stop everybody. If you got a green light, let them go. If you got a yellow light, put your scope on them, look at them. So there's people, whistleblowers now coming out and telling, and he was talking about the stuff he saw there. And, he didn't know the names, but he said, saw a real tall gray kind of guy. And then he saw a reptilian guy with a tail. And then he saw, 12 beautiful women, all looked identical, come out, and they had 6 on each side, and they had some high level politicians and stuff. They were showing these ladies, like Playboy level, gorgeous model types, but all identical. And then the general that was showing the politicians, these clones, gave a gun to one and pointed up to the lady on the other side, said, "Shoot her." And she just shot the lady, and nobody blinked an eye or nothing. So obviously soulless things.
Where was this, Gene?
This is at S4, which is part of that huge complex, Area 51, S4, S44, and et cetera. It's a massive 6-base complex. He said the building there was 1 mile on each side. It was so huge, and the doors were so massive that as the series doors getting bigger and bigger, that they had these huge series of hydraulic ramps to open the biggest door. And then the triangle craft we were talking about before would come out in that case. And he also saw another time, all kinds of different things he said he saw. So there's a lot of whistleblowers coming out with stuff now.
So this was down in the southern Utah, like Area 51, going towards. Okay. It's interesting. You mentioned earthquake. So right at the beginning of the spring of 2020, when lockdown started, I remember about a week or two later, there was that earthquake in Utah, and coincidentally, I mentioned this before, but the Mormon trumpet on the Salt Lake Temple fell off, and I saw that, and I realized it was like, that's a marker. And if you look at President Trump when he visited Temple Square, and he met the leader of the Mormon church, and he walked in front of him, just like he did with the Queen and all the others, And there's that famous reel of all the places Trump kind of served them notice before we went into 2020, and he's clearly showing he's the boss and in charge, and they've all submitted. The same thing with the Mormon church. So their leaders followed him around. He went through the Deseret shopping facility, the food storage facility, and the welfare facility, and they're all kind of kowtowing behind him, And it's like, So the Trump of the last days went and trumped them, and the trumpet fell off. And even in Christopher Nolan's film, the second one, The Dark Knight, talks about Moroni's men. And Moroni is the last prophet in the Book of Mormon. And but Moroni You can pronounce it that way, but no one does. But it was almost staged when they reported in the local Salt Lake City news area. They got this guy that said he was from Italy. He was American, but they said he was from Italy. And the woman's interviewing him. So what did you think of it? And he said, "Oh yeah, I noticed that the Moroni trumpet, that fell." And the only other place I could ever find that they referred to Moroni or Moroni, pronounced Moroni incorrectly, was in the Dark Knight film, the Christopher Nolan film. And they said Moroni's men. They weren't saying Moroni, but that's the only two places. And it's like, I just felt that there was codes in that as well. But yeah, instead of it flying through the air in the last days, it fell and it dropped the mic, But anyway, Gene, it's been a real pleasure. I'm going to have to rewatch this a number of times because there were so many things that you were blowing my mind with, but it was incredible.
If you look at Area 51 and S4, that's in Nevada, actually. It's in the Papoose Mountains area. And then or in Kennecott and that stuff in Salt Lake, that's up in Utah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Well, thanks.
So thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. We'll have to do this again. Yeah, it's awesome. So many things. I have to rewatch it myself. And do you want to shout out your website again so everyone can have a look?
Yeah, it's going to be genedecode.org. We'll have it up. We're planning on having it up on the 17th. So thank you for that, Tom.
Oh, you're welcome, Gene.